Remarks about the singing, and if you're here for the first time, you know he wasn't lying from Sunday morning till now. And even Brad did a good job. Now I know why there's no longer 2-week meetings. Preacher run out of clothes after the first week. Back in the day, they didn't make spandex around the waist. Anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is thank you to all of you that either took us out and brought us back or had us in your home. And I think it shows. Preachers talk about it be a 10-pound meeting, and y'all understand that. But it's a nasty job, but somebody's got to do it. It's a wonderful, wonderful occupation that we have and work that we do, because we get to work with the best people on this side of the earth. And one thing that helped me get out of working and start preaching, I guess I can say that, but you better not, is the good people that I knew I'd be working with. And I appreciate those of you who are out in the workforce who are not as fortunate as we to get to work with such great people. Another thanks that I want to give is to the elders for the courage that they had to ask. I don't know if they felt sorry for me or what, but I appreciate their confidence and encouragement, and all of your sweet words. Really makes the work worth it. And I got to thank Judy too for me taking over the house, the table, and wherever she needs to be. It seems like that's where I am, spread out all over the house. But studying and putting these lessons together, and hopefully they have been beneficial. I hope they've been as beneficial to you as they have to me, as we've tried to give these characters life, so that when you go back and read the chapters, as we started off with Jesus, we saved the best for first. And now tonight we close with Joseph, another wonderful character. And these characters show us that we can do it. You can do it. They were on this same earth. They dealt with the problems that we deal with. One songwriter said, I know it's worse now than it was back then. The Bible puts every sin that we have to deal with that they had to deal with as well. We just need to be aware of our adversary, the devil, and fight the good fight and lay hold on eternal life. As Reggie just prayed, we don't know when our heart will quit beating, do we? And to know how fortunate we are to be able to dress ourselves and feed ourselves and not be living in a hospital bed. How blessed we are, right? And then to be able to come here in an air-conditioned building. We didn't always have that. Didn't always have fans, except the manual. So we are blessed, aren't we? Not only seats with backs, but seats with padded backs. So we are blessed. Tonight, we want to look at Joseph in Genesis chapter 39. And if you're familiar with the Bible at all, this is the first book in the Old Testament, of course. And you're familiar with this character. Even people who are not church-going people know about Joseph. But it's not just a story in the Bible that you tell your kids. Paul said in Romans 15:4, the things which were written aforetime are written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the Scriptures might have hope. I see through these characters the hope that they left for us. They did it, and so can we. So can I. Genesis 39. Now, this is from the New International Version. I don't usually use it, but this was a very clear passage of what happens to Joseph here. And I want it to be clear. I want you to go home having understood everything that we've said tonight. And be aware of the tests that Joseph went through. At the end of verse 6 it begins, "Now Joseph was well built and handsome. And after a while his master's wife," that would be Potiphar's wife, "took notice of Joseph and said, 'Come to bed with me.' But he refused. 'With me in charge,' he told her, 'my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?' And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even to be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, 'Come to bed with me.' But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house." The story of Joseph is much like a TV serial with an S. Episode after episode. And man has divided the Bible into chapters and verses, and each chapter, in this case, ends at the right spot and where they should end. They leave us as the close of one episode, and then the next chapter is the beginning of another. At the end of chapter 37, verse 39, Joseph has been sold into Egypt. Do you know the rest of that story? Not by his enemies, but by his brothers. Sold. And the Bible tells us he called to them. He pleaded with them. And they took Joseph and they put him in chains. And his feet were hurt. That's what you did to slaves. Then we skip chapter 38 because that's the travesty of Judah. You can read that on your own time. So jumping down to chapter 39, Joseph's roller coaster ride continues. It's divided into 3 parts. Verses 1 through 6, his test of prosperity. Verses 7 through 12, his test of purity. And then the last verses that we'll not get into so much is the test of persecution. Potiphar was the chief of police. That was Joseph's boss. He might be compared to the Secret Service, the head over the Secret Service. He was Pharaoh's bodyguard. So Joseph went from Jacob's house of love to Potiphar's house and being a slave. He, as it were, was a POW, a war from his own household. We never read of God speaking to Joseph, yet the providence of God is very evident in Joseph's life. As we look at Joseph tonight and some of the tests that he had to endure. First of all, the extent of his prosperity. Is that a test? Anybody who prospers needs to know that it is going to be a test for you. Those who desire to be rich, Paul says, they pierce themselves through with many sorrows. 24/7 it is their goal to be rich. That wasn't Joseph's attitude. But the beginning of his prosperity is from chapter 39, verses 2 through 6, and we'll just give you a little brief touch of that. You know about King Midas, who anything that he touched turned to gold? Remember that old story? But it seemed that way with Joseph. But it wasn't anything so much that he did. It was because God was on his side. Verse 2 tells us. The Lord was with him. The Lord is not with sinners, but he is with those who follow him and do his will. That was the source of Joseph's prosperity. When things are going so well, how do you handle it? When things are going well, how do you handle it? Does it take you away from God? When you don't have so many worries, financially you seem to be secure, that's when a lot of people fall away from God. They turn away from God, the very one who's given them the ability to do and to have what they have. Joseph met with success around every corner. Some people who are born with a silver spoon in their mouth don't end up too well, do they? Several years ago I read of a millionaire. That's back when $1 million was a lot of money. This millionaire died and he's left all of his money to his son. And just days after the funeral, the son was down in the streets of New York writing checks out to anybody. How much do you need? 10,000, 20,000, 30,000? Solomon also said, who's to know that you don't give it to a fool? Huh? All of it gone. All of it gone. The source of Joseph's prosperity was God. And his prosperity spread to Potiphar, and Potiphar saw that. He saw that the Lord was with Joseph. Can people see that God is with us? Listen, can he? Can your neighbors tell that God is with you? That you are with God? That's why Joseph was being blessed. And of all people, to be where he was and to still be working with God and loving God, that is unusual. He could have said, well, if this is the way it's going to be, I've been a good boy all my life, and look where it's got me. But he didn't do that, did he? He stayed with the Lord through thick and thin, and so should we. Potiphar was not jealous like Saul was of David, do you remember? Instead of Saul saying, David, sick him, go get the Philistines, he got jealous. How did that work out for Saul? Turned him into a madman, didn't it? He could be having a good day, and then David walks by, and Potiphar could have been like that, but he had more sense. He gave everything into Joseph's hands. Joseph knew more about what Potiphar had than Potiphar knew. And that's what he just told his wife, didn't he? Boy, was that a good talking to. You need to read that again. I can't do this. You're his wife. He's my boss. And I can't commit this sin before God. You know what he knew? He knew that God saw. And that's what we've been pointing out all week, haven't we? Proverbs 15:3. You ought to know that if you've been here a couple of times. The eyes of the Lord are where? Everywhere. Beholding what? Just the good, the evil, and the good. You mean all over the world? No, he knows your evil and your good. He knows it all. Read Matthew 25 again, verse 30 beginning. Jesus tells us, he saw the brethren when they fed him, when they clothed him, when they visited him. And you know what? They just did that because that was the right thing to do. When did we do that, Lord? When you did it unto one of the least of these my brethren, you did it unto me. And when we don't, we do it unto him. What did he say to Saul? Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou why persecutest thou me? When we're hurting, he's hurting. That's how much he cares, and I think that's why he was standing when Stephen was stoned in Acts chapter 7. Before Stephen died, what did he see? Jesus standing at the right hand of God. That's just my tweener reading. The source of his prosperity was God. And Potiphar promoted him. And the result, he was noticed. You will be noticed. Did you know good workers are noticed? Hard workers are noticed, aren't they? So are the lazy ones. One preacher's son was working at a fast food restaurant. And the manager called the preacher and said, "Do you have any more like him?" And he said, "Yes, I've got a daughter." He said, "Send her down." That young man's hard work got his sister a job. Didn't make her mad either. Now, after you get the money, then the test comes. After you have the prosperity, what are you going to do with your prosperity? If Joseph were living today, he would be in or near the White House. That's where he'd be. The test of prosperity came. He was a prominent man in Egypt. Perhaps not everybody, but all the big wheels would know who Joseph was. Potiphar's attendant. Potiphar's main man. And if I'm Potiphar, I'm going to be telling everybody about this young man. Sure you would. Anytime you find something like that. Joseph was prominent. Joseph was also a man of position. Where was he? He was high up, wasn't he? Turned from a slave into his master's attendant. He knew everything. He took care of all of his affairs. Joseph was a man of prominency and a man of power, and he was a position and a man of power. He had slaves under him. Potiphar was blessed because of Joseph. Everything that he did was good. And then he was popular, very popular. Then the last. The Bible says this about him. He had a good physique. Not only that, it tells us he was good looking, verse 6. Good looking and well built. Very handsome. You see what Potiphar's wife was after? Genesis 29 and verse 17 describes his mother the same way. Somebody said maybe that's children get their good looks from their mother. Today, too much is placed on looks, isn't it? Movie stars, politicians, when they take their pictures, they got to have their good side. They want to get their good side. It's all about the looks, and they forget. A lot of times these Hollywood characters, they'll marry one another, but then the looks start to fade. Nobody told them about that. So now we've got the 60-year-old marrying 20-year-olds. That's what that's all about, is looks. Good looks can get you in trouble. We said last night, what brings you up can bring you down. Your popularity, your prosperity, yes, your physique, all of that can bring you down. It all starts with your pride. What does 16:18 of Proverbs say? Pride goeth, we usually say, before a fall. No. Pride goeth before what? It's a D word. Destruction. You don't just fall, it is destruction. You can feel pride in you. And we need to wake up to that. Seldom do we find good looks and humility, like we found in Abigail last night. Nothing worse than a handsome man or a pretty girl who thinks they are just about it. Then he's ruined, isn't he? Joseph didn't think that about himself. Then we have the test of purity. The tests of purity. The power of the temptation. Verses 7 through 12. The power of the temptation. First of all, it was a surprise temptation. A surprise temptation. She had the element of surprise on Joseph, didn't he? When he went in that day, he wasn't expecting that. I know what she's going to be doing. No. Not expecting it at all. A surprise attack. But he handled it, didn't he? This is the power of the temptation. It was a surprise. It was also a sustained temptation. She kept after him. Jesus said in the book of Luke chapter 9, take up your cross daily, verse 23. You let your guard down tomorrow, you're going to fall. And you're going to wish you wouldn't. And when you hear the words of Solomon, the way of the transgressor is hard, you're going to know just how hard. Aren't you? You don't want to know the consequences. Or maybe you should. And maybe that's the problem, is that we shield our children from the consequences of sin, and then the consequences come. So the temptation was not only a surprise temptation, it was a sustained, a constant one. Not one day, but every day. She did not give up. A one-time temptation is a lot easier to escape than one that is daily. Sometimes people resist at first, but after continually, they give up and give in. Demas did. Wonder how Paul felt when he had to write, Demas hath forsaken me. How could you do that? He was in love with the world. Joseph's resistance could have broken down, but it didn't. And that's what we're going to have to know. And that's a lesson we need to learn from him. Peter had said in 1 Peter 5 and verse 8, I call it the 3B passage. Be sober, be vigilant, be cause. Your adversary, the devil, walketh about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. You picture your adversary as a roaring lion. I don't know about you. Some people are so silly they reach their hand in through the bars of a cage and they come back without an arm or without a life. Joseph knew what he was dealing with. Long before Paul had told us to put on the whole armor of God in Ephesians 6, Joseph armed himself, didn't he? Not only was the temptation a surprise and a sustained temptation, but it was also a secret temptation. Now listen to this. Stay alert. It was just the two of them. Who's gonna know? I'm not going to tell. A secret temptation. I'm not going to tell. That's a test of character, isn't it? And I pretty well guarantee you that some of you have already had to face that, haven't you? How'd you do? Did you pass or did you cave in? Somebody asks you to do something that you know, a warning flag goes up, but you knock it over. How you going to do tomorrow? How you going to feel tomorrow? You going to be glad that you did what you did last night? You can if you say, as Joseph did, not going to happen. We need to read this chapter as if we were one of the characters, and particularly Joseph. And to know what I'm going to do when the temptation is a surprise and a sustained and a secret temptation. I've known several who have fallen, several preachers who have fallen. We don't have the time for me to tell you how horrible their consequences are. But you stay alert, and you stay away from that. And husbands, if you're thinking about being unfaithful to your wife, you think again. If you're already involved and it's already started, you back away. And you pray to God to forgive you. You're going to get consequences that you never even thought of. Then, temptation was a sensible. Excuse me? How could it be a sensible? We rationalize it. When we succumb to temptation, we reason it in through our mind. He could have rationalized and said, I deserve this. I deserve this pleasure. Look what's happened to me. What is good has happened to me for being good? Just saying. It would have been to his personal advantage, he could have said. This is going to benefit me. She could have given more applause to her husband. Tell her, oh, this Joseph fellow, I really like him. He could have thought that way. He could have rationalized, couldn't he? This makes sense to a fellow who wants to do that. Or a woman who wants to do that. You can make sense out of it. Make it a sensible, well, sure. Just a natural thing to do. And again, the devil will blind you to the consequences. And don't come crying to the elders, okay? That's not going to undo your situation, is it? Then next, it was a subtle temptation. How subtle? Well, I'll tell you, 3 good chapters to read is Proverbs 5, 6, and 7. And particularly chapter 7. The attention that this woman gives to this young man who has gone through the streets in the dark of the night. He's going at the wrong place at the wrong time to the wrong person. And she just builds him up. You know what she says right off? I've been waiting for you all of my life. Where have you been? Me? Like a lamb to the slaughter. They don't know what's happening. But you will. You will know. And the devil's not going to tell you, oh, you better be careful. Yeah. Oh, he's going to say, come on. What attracts that fish to the lure? You do that on purpose? Reggie, when you're fishing, you do that on purpose, don't you? You make that lure look delectable to that fish. And then, the fish that wishes, too late. Caught. A subtle temptation. That's the power of the temptation. And now, we look at the power over the temptation. How in the world did he do that? With all of the power of the temptation going for her. She knew she was going to have this handsome young man. He was hers. She set the trap. But he didn't fall for it. You know how he could do it? He had conviction before the crisis. Parents, you need to be telling your sons and your daughters. Do we just say, honey, here's the keys. Go out and learn to drive. Here you go. Yeah. We don't do that, do we? I've only known one grandfather that took his children out in the middle of the lake that didn't know how to swim and said, make it to shore. They did. I told him I didn't think I could do that. Didn't think I could make it to shore, and I know I wouldn't throw my children in the middle of the lake. Just saying. You have to have conviction. He refused Just say no, isn't that the thing? How do you say no? No, I better not. You know, that's egging me on, because I think I've almost got you now. Again, we repeat, what part of no don't you understand? And that speech that Joseph gave to Mrs. Potiphar, that should have squelched her, but it didn't, did it? You talk about somebody determined. She was the devil in women's clothing, wasn't she? Joseph had conviction before the crisis. I want to tell you, you hesitate, you'll lose. You're making up your mind at the moment of impact. No, you've already got to know. On the highway, they call it defensive driving. You've got to know what you're going to do when something happens. You can't be, done. Making decisions at the crisis is too late. Joseph was already pure. Keep thyself pure, 1 Timothy 5 verse 22 says. And that's what Joseph was all about. Power over the temptation. Love involves loyalty. Husbands, you've got to love your wife and be loyal to her. You've got to love God and be loyal to God, as Joseph was. When Jesus was asked by the lawyer, what's the great commandment? Somebody suggested that they thought they had him. Whatever you say, Jesus, is going to be wrong. What do you mean? Well, if Jesus said, well, thou shalt not kill, I think that's probably the best. Well, what about not to steal, not commit adultery? Oh, well, yeah, those are good too. Well, I thought you said that. You see? How did Jesus handle it? He covered all the bases, didn't he? Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength, with all thy mind. And thy neighbor as thyself. And that's what Joseph was doing. Loving God and his neighbor Potiphar. I can't do this. I can't do this. Because love involves loyalty. But the thinking today is not that, is it? It's consent between two adults. Really. Sometimes I wonder how mature those people are. When they've been blinded by the pleasures of sin. Joseph must have been a sissy, somebody said. No, he was the man, wasn't he? He didn't have to face the consequences. I think McGarvey in his commentary said Potiphar had the right to kill Joseph. But I think he knew his wife. And he knew Joseph. But he had to do something, and Joseph lost. Love involves loyalty. Then he had the sense to avoid the source. I think verse 10 says he avoided being with her whenever he could. Mrs. Potiphar was a sly temptress, wasn't she? And no doubt a beautiful woman because of Potiphar's power to choose. Listen to her. And I would think that she would say, now what I've done isn't working. Just asking him, you know, I'm God's gift to men, so as soon as I ask him, he's just going to follow me. So she tries, I'm so lonely, Joseph. Potiphar's gone all the time taking care of Pharaoh. I never get to see him and never get to talk to him. Couldn't we just do lunch sometime? You know, innocently. Huh? Sweet old me. Come on, I'm not doing no harm. In Proverbs 6:28, and 29. You scoop fire into your lap, what's going to happen? You're going to be burned. You walk on fire, what's going to happen? Yeah. So you don't have to be a genius. I got that first reading. What's fire do to you? You ever been burned? You know, that's not a do-over. I think I've told you, when I was a little bitty boy, old enough to know better, probably 6 years old, I found me a book of matches. And my granddaddy had taught me how to strike them. Little paper matches. And I don't know how many was in that. I was sitting on the bathtub at our house. I don't know where everybody else was. I was having so much fun, and I got to the last match. Put my finger on that head of that match and brought it across. It lit. Right there. The head of that match stayed right there. And for about 20 some years I had a little red dot. You know what I thought of every time I saw that little red dot on the end of my finger? You do that again? You play with fire? First one, second one, third one, 15th, 20th. Last one. Just saying. You might be able to get away with it for a while, but you be sure your sin will find you out. And then think about it. But you don't, do you? You don't think about it. Well, it's my body. It'll just be me. No, it will not be you alone. And that we do not consider. He had the sense to avoid her, not going to be with her. When she realized he wasn't going to bed with her, she tried this ploy. And I know it. That's what it's talking about. Verse 10, it says, or to be with her. I'm not going to do lunch with her. I'm not going to spend any time more than I absolutely have to. He had the sense to avoid. And then quickly, he was shocked by sin. We no longer are. We are becoming desensitized. That's a big word, isn't it? To it. It's all around us. It's on magazines, covers, and in every store. Walmart knows where to place these things. And you know what it generally is a woman, isn't it? Scantily clad. And now some of the Lord's church, some of His own people, are dressing like magazine covers and are not ashamed. That's how Hollywood dresses. That's in vogue. That's in fashion now. Walked through a Walmart in West Virginia. One of our members' daughters, teenage daughters. I saw her about 40 yards away. She was standing in the women's clothing, and as I got closer, I saw what she was looking at. She didn't see me. Short shorts. And I'm talking the briefest that she was trying, look, how's she going to look in those? Then I just kept walking. I got real, about 3 feet away from her. And all of a sudden she just disappeared. She didn't say hello, goodbye, kissed my foot. She just walked off. I thought, young lady, you ought to be ashamed. But I'm not the only one who saw you doing that. Just like Joseph. Joseph was shocked. Back in the day, we didn't have a remote. We had to get up off of our chair and turn the TV. No. Yes, really. There was no remote. We have remotes now. Just use your thumb or whatever finger you use to change the channel. Do you do that? Well, I'll be off in just a second. Really? Trash in, trash out. Didn't Solomon say something like, keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life? You better guard it, because what goes in comes out. As he thinketh in his heart, so is he, 23:7. Joseph was victorious over sin because he was shocked by it, not shock-proof. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He said it to her. He knew what Proverbs 1 and verse 10 said. My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. Can you do that? Young boys, young men, would you make that pledge? When it comes your day for the test, and it will, and may already have, and I hope you pass with flying colors. We need to be shocked by sin. It's still a sin against God, isn't it? Whatever the sin is. But James says, as we reminded you the other night, in James 1 and verse 14, but every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust. What was the comedian that said, the devil made me do it? It was funny on TV, but it's not funny when we're going to stand before God. I'm drawn away of my own lust, my own desire. That's the name of that tune. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin. That's the baby. And sin, when it is finished, kills the baby. Bringeth forth death. Well, many have wished they were dead, and many follow that with suicide. Because they realize now what they have done, and it can't be undone. And they're going to hear, depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire. Just saying. Being shocked by sin. Then last of all, retreat is better than defeat. There's something about this sexual sin today is that everybody's doing it. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you. And I want to tell you, girls, he may tell you, I won't tell anybody. At least not till he drops you off at the door. Now he can let everybody know on his cell phone. Can't he? Oh, I won't tell. See, you're the one to conquer. And he's going to let everybody know that. Guess what that's going to make of your name? Your reputation. And I can still take my 1963 Excalibur Richwoods Community High School yearbook and go through those pictures and tell you the girls with the good and the bad reputation. We knew who they were. You know how we knew? Yes, sir. Mrs. Potiphar devised another plan. If I cannot get him by coaxing him daily, challenging him daily, I will physically drag him in. How do you think? She just, Joseph, would you go with me, honey? She was sick and tired of the delay. She grabbed his coat, so much so that he could walk out of it and leave it in her hands. And she still wasn't through. Oh, Potiphar, tell you what she thought about her husband. Potiphar's brought him in here to make sport of us. Liar, liar, pants on fire. This is serious business. Burn it, brand it into your hearts to make the right choices. I know it is a difficult situation. I know it is hard. But know there will be results. There will be good results when you don't. There will be horrible, everlasting, continual, on and on, ever and ever results that you want no part of. Joseph ran. Paul said, 1 Corinthians 6, verse 18, flee fornication. How you doing? How you doing? Paul said, 2 Timothy 2:21, flee youthful lusts. Boys, girls, men, women, It never leaves. Peter talks about men whose eyes were full of adultery. Whoa. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Resist the devil, James 4 and verse 7, and he will flee. You'll be the winner, he'll be the loser. Somebody said, buy a good pair of Nikes and run. Run for your life. You want to be happy when you're 71? I want you to be happy. I want you to have a family. So happy with Grant and Megan and their growing little family. Man, is that good to see, isn't it? And others of you, as your families are growing. You're such a wonderful example. You too can do it, even in a world that is filled with ungodliness. Watch the young couples and how they're doing it. That's what Judy and I did. Say, how do you all do it? How do you do this? Well, first of all, you find somebody that you love and that loves you back. Too many times we fall in lust with one another. And that's not enough. That's not it. That's not what the Lord wants of us in our relationships with each other. He said, till death do you part. How are we doing? How are you going to be doing in 5 years? A lot of you will have slept rings on fingers in that time. I want to see you so happy coming in 6 months after your marriage, still holding hands 6 years after your 6 decades after you. We still like holding hands. Yeah. Quite a thrill. I know that's how I feel. And she holds it back. That's the way it ought to be, folks. Joseph had every reason to fail, didn't he? But he didn't. So these chapters are not in here just for a story, good bedtime story, though they are good for that. Movies have been made, books have been written, and they ought to be. Sermons have been preached, and they ought to be. Now let's emulate, young and old, every one of us, the man with purity in his heart. Be warned, be aware, be alert, or the devil will get you, and you don't want the results. Tonight we've not explained to you how to be a Christian, and maybe all through this week, but we do still extend the invitation of God. Jesus said, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden. You're sick and tired of this world and the roads it leads you, the detours it takes you off, then follow the way, the truth, and the life. If anybody knows what to do to be saved, Jesus did, didn't he? He told the apostles in Mark 16 and verse 15, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. And they did. Paul twice in Colossians 1 said we completed our mission. Completed. It was done. We are blessed to be a part of those who have received this gospel. And if you have been obedient and been baptized into Christ, like the Bible says, most people do not hear that, they do not believe that, and I've had people shake their head when I've preached it and quoted the verses that tell us that we're buried with Him in baptism. Sit across from me at a table and I'll read verses, and one lady said, I know that's what it says, but there's no buts about it. When Jesus said, go preach the gospel to every creature, he that believeth what you preach the gospel and is baptized shall be saved. People reverse that, don't they? Some have you baptized when you're an infant sprinkled, calling it baptism, which it is not. Baptism is a burial. And then you're saved as an infant. And you have to take somebody's word for it. Others tell you, no, all you have to do is believe. Is that what Jesus said? He that believeth is saved and then shall be baptized. You say, what? How do they get that out of that simple little verse? And they claim, oh, I love the Lord, but they're not doing what He says. Why call ye me Lord, Lord, and do not the things that I say? See that? Oh, one fellow said, I just love my old Bible. I love the Lord. No, you don't. If you don't do what He simply said, I could understand it. Even I can understand it, and so can you. Don't resist what the Holy Spirit has revealed to you, whereby when you read you may understand my knowledge in the mystery. We're not under the Old Testament wondering, what is he talking about? What is this new king and kingdom? What is this Messiah's job? We know, and we're a part of His kingdom, an everlasting kingdom that shall never be destroyed. Daniel chapter 2. We are part of it, and we want you to be a part of it. Before you leave this building tonight, one day you might leave it and it'll be the last time. And we'll come to your funeral without any hope for your soul. While you're weeping and gnashing your teeth and in an eternal fire. That's not much hope for those left, is it? I don't want to leave that. And neither do you. Won't you, at this hour, we're going to stand and sing a song of invitation to do just that. This front row is empty. You'd be glad to take your confession that you believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Is that too hard for anybody? Shake your head this way. No, you can do it. Don't wish you hadn't. The consequences are eternal. Change it right now while we stand, Brad, while we sing.